Mike check is Shantae Arnett. You guys are tuned in to In My Queer View. This is the discussion series where we talk about the queer experience, what it's like being queer in America, my journey through the queer community, and what my perspective is on it. I want to thank all you guys for coming out and clocking in with me for a little bit. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for tuning in and giving me a little bit of your time. If you could please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Do all those things that you see your favorite YouTubers tell you to do in their videos. If you're returning to my channel, hey girl, welcome back. And I appreciate you for coming back and giving me a little bit more of your time. Shout out to everybody watching this video. Today's episode is going to be a little somber and it's going to be a little heavy. I just want to go ahead and prepare you guys because today's episode is In My Queer View is about the trans people who've been killed, not just in America, but around the world in the year 2019. The reason why I wanted to do this video was because I believe that America is becoming desensitized to the deaths of trans people. I believe that we have been seeing trans people getting murdered so much in this country that we have now turned it into a spam article. We've turned trans deaths into a spam article that when you're scrolling through it on social media, you just keep going because you don't have any reason to stop. It's like, oh, okay, you've seen one trans murder, you've seen them all. And that is a hateful and disgusting perspective and point of view that I want to break. And I want to humanize the trans people that have been killed in the United States and the world as an entirety. The reason why this became so important to me was because I was looking at some figures and I realized that the number of trans deaths around the world in 2019 was less than the deaths of the trans people just in America. And that hurts me so badly because the fact that America is perceived as the land of hope, where people come to make all their dreams come true, the melting pot of the world, and the fact that more people of diverse backgrounds have been murdered in the greatest country in the world, allegedly, than any other country in the world is insane to me. So I'm going to read through the people in other countries who were murdered, but I'm going to take my time and read a little bit about how each person in America was murdered, because there is an overwhelming trend throughout the deaths in America that I'm not going to acknowledge until the end of the video, because there's some things that I want to say. So I'm just going to dive right in and we're going to get to it. So the first country that we have is Australia, and Melody Poland Bruno, a Filipina trans woman, was murdered. This was in September of 2019. In Europe, we have Alex Milkovich, who was murdered in June 2019. And one thing I'm going to say, and be sure to say, is that these people didn't die. They weren't killed. Or they didn't die. They didn't pass away. They didn't perish. They were murdered. And I need people to understand the depths of what's happened to these people. It's not like they died of a disease or they died in a hospital or they died of natural causes. They were murdered. Their lives were taken. And I need people to have a visceral reaction to this. I need people to have more of a reaction to this because I feel like our lives don't matter, especially in America. Just keep watching. We have Kira, whose name was changed in the news, a 26-year-old trans woman from Russia, murdered. Nina Sergutskia, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Nina Sergutskia was 25 and was murdered by her boyfriend in also from Eastern Russia. In El Salvador, we have Camila Diaz Cordova, who was murdered in February of this year and was 29. In Mexico, which has the most trans deaths next to America this year, Renata Spencer, a trans woman murdered sometime in early 2019. Her body was found on March 11th. We have a transgender woman with an unconfirmed name who was murdered in Mexico City. The body was found on March 13th of this year. Johnny SS. It's spelled Jony, so the J may be pronounced as an H in this case. I'm not exactly sure, but this was a transgender woman who was beaten to death in Cotzintla on June 14th. Carlos VG, also known as Carly. I'm sorry they dead named her in this listing. Carly, a transgender woman, was stabbed to death in Oaxaca, July 15th. LaBecky was a 52-year-old trans woman who owned the local gay bar in Minatitlán. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the names of these cities right. Minatitlán. And LaBecky was murdered in a mass shooting in a family gathering that I'm not sure was at her local bar, but 14 people were murdered, including LaBecky. Jesusa Fidel Ventura Reyes, better known as Chucha, was a 25-year-old trans woman who was killed in the Mexican state of Veracruz. She went missing on May 17th. She wasn't found until May 19th, and her body was identified and claimed on May 20th. I'm not going to read the dead names of these people. I'm going to try to read their chosen names as much as possible. So if I read their dead name first by accident, I apologize. Brittany, a 20-year-old trans woman, was killed in the city of Minsalta in Veracruz. There was another unconfirmed name of a trans woman who was murdered in Acapulco on August 23rd. Anna Paula was a transgender woman who was killed in Jutepec. I hope I'm pronouncing these names right, but I'm gonna put the link in the description box. They also have descriptions of how these people were murdered and how they were found or identified and what the resolution was to their murder. In the United States, I'm going to actually read some of how they were murdered because I feel like we're being skipped over and we're being ignored in the grand scheme of social injustices when it comes to America. And I want to highlight some things. Okay? So I'm just going to read through as much as I can. I meant to get something to prop this up with. Sorry, y'all. Hold on. So I won't be looking down the entire video. Okay. Up first, we have Dana Martin, 31. A trans woman of color was found shot to death in her vehicle in a roadside ditch about 11 p.m. on Sunday, January 6th in Montgomery, Alabama. She was shot while driving, and police, as of January 10th, continue to investigate but have no leads. Elle Marie Washstock, a non-binary person, was found dead by their teenage son at 8 a.m. on Thursday, January 31st, at their World Golf Village condominium in St. Augustine, Florida. It was ruled a homicide, and according to Putnam County Sheriff's Office, no suspect has been identified. Jasleen Ware, age unknown, a trans woman of color, was found dead in her apartment on Monday, March 25th in Memphis, Tennessee. Initially thought to be a suicide, police currently regard the case as a homicide for reasons not made public. Ashanti Carmen, 27, a trans woman of color, was shot dead and killed around 6:30 a.m. Saturday, March 30th in Prince George's County, Maryland. The day of her death, the eve of International Transgender Visibility Day, made her murder poignant for the international trans community. Her history of survival sex, which she did homeless at age 16, and the location of her murder, popular sex worker and transgender local Eastern Avenue, makes her death a likely instance of violence against sex workers. There are currently no leads in the shooting. Claire Legato, 21, a trans woman of color, was shot in the head on Monday, April 15th, after an argument broke out between her mother and the suspect in Cleveland, Ohio. Malaysia Booker, 23, a trans woman of color, found shot and killed after a 6:40 a.m. shooting report call, Saturday, May 18th in Dallas, Texas. There are currently no leads in the shooting. The shooting comes a little bit more than a month after a since viral video that gained national attention showed Booker being publicly beaten and called slurs on April 12th. This is the kind of stuff that caused me to want to read these things out loud. You know, I want to humanize all the trans lives that we've lost in 2019, and hearing that Malaysia was murdered, or that she was murdered after a video went viral of her being beaten on my mother's birthday, April 12th. It just, you know, sometimes these things hit a little differently. Michelle Tamika Washington, age 40. A trans woman of color and longtime transgender rights advocate, was fatally shot in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania neighborhood of Franklinville on Sunday, May 19th, shortly after 5 a.m. Police responded to several shots fired and found Washington had been shot several times, at which she had been taken to Temple University Hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival. A suspect in her murder has since been arrested. Paris Cameron, a trans woman of color, was shot in Detroit, Michigan on Saturday, May 25th, Memorial Day weekend, along with two cisgendered individuals. She was taken into critical condition to a local hospital where she was pronounced dead. Eyewitnesses report gunshots ringing out after being heard from the house all the victims were in, after which numerous people fled onto the street. Police have arrested a suspect in relation to the murder. I'm not sure if this is Chinel or Chanel. It looks like it might be Chanel. I'm gonna go with Chanel. Chanel Lindsay, age 26, a trans woman of color, was found in White Rock Lake, Dallas, Texas at 5:45 p.m. on Saturday, June 1st. She's the second trans murder in Dallas, Texas in 2019, following Malaysia Booker just 2 weeks prior. The city was celebrating their annual Pride Festival on the same weekend, and Lindsay's body was discovered only a mile from where Booker's body was discovered. The Dallas police have asked the FBI to assist in the investigation. Her death brings the currently unresolved trans homicide cases in Dallas to 4 as of June 2019. On June 20th, 2019, the Dallas police arrested a suspect who has been charged with the murder of Chanel Lindsay. Johanna Medina Leon, 25. A trans woman from El Salvador seeking asylum in the United States died in Immigrations and Customs Enforcement in El Paso, Texas on Saturday, June 1st around 9 p.m. After applying for asylum at the Paso del Norte port of entry on April 11th, Leon was detained at the facility where she informed the officials of her medical condition, including complications resulting from HIV. Leon passed her interview, determining that she had credible fear of prosecutions should she return to El Salvador on May 18th, but was not paroled until she entered the hospital later that month. According to family and advocates, during her incarceration at the facility, she had been denied medication and treatment, resulting in her death at the Del Sol Medical Center. Chanel Scurlock, age 23, a trans woman of color, found shot and killed just after midnight in Lumberton, North Carolina, my home state. I know where Lumberton is. I'm from Fayetteville, but I know North Carolina very well. On Wednesday, June 5th, by Robeson County Sheriff deputies. Her family indicated she had planned to meet up with the owner of a Facebook page with media content of her. Friends and activities confirmed that Scurlock identified as a trans woman. However, she had been misgendered and dead-named by local media, even referred to as a gay man by her mother in local reports. While the Robeson County Sheriff Bernice Wilkins has indicated that they have strong leads in the investigation, his office has asked for public assistance regarding the case. On June 11th, police arrested a suspect on charges of first-degree murder and robbery with a dangerous weapon in the killing of Chanel Scurlock. Zoe Spears, age 23. A trans woman of color was shot and killed in Fairmont Heights, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C., on Thursday, June 13th. The murder occurred just a few blocks from where earlier in March 2019, Ashanti Carmen was murdered. Prince George's County Police Major Brian Riley said that at this point in the investigation, there's no direct link that we see at this point, but obviously something we are monitoring very closely to see if there are any links. Carmen and Spears knew each other and were part of a close group of sex workers in the area. 2 weeks after her death, police arrested a suspect indicted on murder charges, first degree, in the killing of Zoe Spears. Brooklyn Lindsay, age 32, a trans woman of color, was found shot and killed in front of an abandoned building in Kansas City, Missouri on Tuesday, June 25th. Kansas City Police Department announced Lindsay had received multiple gunshots and facial trauma. Her body was discovered around 6:30 a.m. Neighbors reportedly heard an argument and gunshots around 2:30 a.m. at the abandoned residence at the 600 block of Spruce Avenue. Chris Wade of the local police project reported that Lindsay had been hospitalized after being brutally beaten weeks before her death. CNN reported Lindsay's death took place near where Tamara Dominguez was murdered in 2015. On July 22nd, a suspected felon was arrested and indicted on Lindsay's murder after being stopped on unrelated domestic violence and armed robbery charges. Denali Berries Stuckey, age 29. A trans woman of color was shot and killed in North Charleston, South Carolina, in the early morning of Saturday, July 20th on Carter Avenue. Early reports misgendered Stuckey. Police investigation is ongoing, but currently has no developments or leads announced. She is the third transgender homicide in South Carolina since 2018. On July 31st, Elizabeth Warren spoke out about her death along with the death of Kiki Fontroy. Tracy Single, née Williams, a trans woman of color found dead in West Houston, Texas on Tuesday, July 30th, victim of a homicide. Single's body was discovered in a convenience store parking lot at the 11th at a convenience store parking lot on Katy Freeway around 2:30 a.m. and moved to a morgue where she laid unidentified for 10 days. The victim's homelessness delayed the identification process. Her identity was revealed by an August 11th town hall meeting organized by local activist Dee Dee Waters. Excuse me. After it was made public and published by Trans Griot on August 14th. Single is the third transgender death in 2019 in Texas, following Malaysia Booker and Shanal Lindsay. Single's boyfriend was charged with her murder in late August. Friends of the victim claim Single attempted to dissolve their relationship just prior to her murder, prompting possible classification of her murder as domestic homicide. Kiki Fontroy, 21, a trans woman of color, was shot and killed in southwest Miami-Dade County, Florida, in the early morning of Wednesday, July 31st, near an abandoned house. Miami police claim the murder resulted from an argument and not a transgender hate crime. However, Fontroy's mother, whom she lived with, and others who knew her disagree. Fontroy was reportedly headed home from a party with a group when a teenage male, 17, approached her and propositioned her for sex, which she declined. After which he began shooting at another member of the group. Fontroy ran, pursued by the young man who opened fire and murdered her. On August 5th, the suspect was arrested in connection with an unrelated case and admitted to the murder in police custody. He's been charged with murder in the second degree and attempted murder. On July 31st, Elizabeth Warren spoke out about her death along with the death of Denali Stuckey. Pebbles LaDime Doe, age 24, a trans woman of color, was found shot dead and killed in Allendale County, South Carolina on Saturday, August 4th. Doe was discovered by a passerby slumped over her car steering wheel on a driveway in the vicinity of Concord Church and on Barnwell Roads. Her killing following 2 weeks after the murder of Denali Stuckey, a fellow trans woman of color from South Carolina. She's the fourth transgender homicide in South Carolina since 2018. Jordan Cofer, age 22, a trans man, was shot and killed Sunday, August 4th, a victim of the 2009 Dayton shooting. Cofer, one of the first victims, was the sibling of the Whoa. Wow. Cofer, one of the victims, was the sibling of the shooter, making his death fratricide. At the time of the shooting, Cofer was not out at his campus of Wright State University to the LGBT community on campus, nor to the university itself. It was not until several weeks later that a friend of Cofer's addressed their social media pages that clearly named himself as Jordan Cofer, using he, him, his pronouns. Only a few of his close friends knew about his gender identity. Cofer was not out to his family. However, because of this, many early reports misgendered and dead named him. It is unclear whether their sibling targeted them or not, and if so, for whatever motive. That's wow. Bailey Reeves, age 17, a trans woman of color, was shot and killed Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day, in Baltimore, Maryland. Reeves was discovered immediately after the shooting around 8 p.m. at the 4300 block of Parkwood Avenue, which is a nearby teen, when a nearby teen heard gunshots and screaming. Finding Reeves in a pool of her own blood, she was taken to a hospital where she later died of multiple gunshot wounds to the torso. Police have released no leads or suspects in the shooting at this time. B. Love Slater, 23, a trans woman of color, was found immolated inside her car Wednesday, September 4th in Clewiston, Florida. Arriving on the scene in the early morning, officials state the body was burned unrecognizable. However, family and friends identified her from the location and car, which was confirmed September 6th by police in a report which did name the victim. Some reports indicate the victim might have been bound and shot prior to immolation. However, these reports remain unconfirmed. No motive or lead has been determined at the time. Those close to the victim have stated they suspect her murder was likely due to her trans status. Elisha Chanel Stanley, 46, a trans woman of color, found dead by homicide on Monday, September 16th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At 6:30 p.m. at the 1000 block of Penn Avenue, which is the Westin Hotel. No other details about the death have been released by officials. However, Pittsburgh police have stated they were investigating. Local activists and friends of the victim alleged investigation by officials and coverage of the media was sparse due to the victim's transgender status. Stanley's funeral was held 3 days after on September 19th. Italy Marlowe, age 29, a trans woman of color, was killed following a shooting in the Southwest Houston, Texas, A trans woman of color named Italy Marlowe, age 29, was killed following a shooting in Southwest Houston, Texas at 2 p.m. on Friday, September 20th. As reported by Houston police, officers responded to a reported shooting at 15829 Ridge Row Lane, during which Marlowe was found lying on the driveway, having been shot multiple times. She was transported to a nearby hospital where she was declared dead. The suspect in the shooting has been indicted for Marlowe's murder, but remains at large and is currently wanted by police. Williams has been reportedly living with Marlowe. I'm sorry, I got caught up in this. I think I just lost my place. Okay, apparently it gave the last name of the alleged murderer, but not the first name, and it just says Williams had been reportedly living with Marlowe. For the year of 2019, Marlowe follows Tracy Single as the second trans murder in Houston, and Malaysia Booker, Chanel Lindsay, and Single as the fourth. And Tracy Single, as the fourth death as the fourth known trans murder in Texas. Sorry, I wanted to go back and make sure that I said all of their names. Malaysia Booker, Chanel Lindsay, Tracy Single were the other three women who were trans murders in Texas, and oh, sorry. Yeah, she follows Tracy Single as the second trans murder in Houston, and Malaysia Booker and Chanel Lindsay and Single as the fourth trans murder in Texas. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read this fast, but I'm skimming through it and I'm trying to make sure that I get everything. Brianna BB Hill, aka Brianna BB, age 30. She's our last person. Age 30, a trans woman of color was shot and killed at 11:30 on Monday, October 14th in eastern Kansas City, Missouri. The Kansas City police said Hill was killed around the Vineyard Park area, dying before first responders could intervene. The suspected gunman remained at the scene of the crime and was taken into police custody, his second confirmed trans murder in Kansas City of 2019. Okay. So what I just read to you guys was a list of 13 transgender people murdered from around the world, and 23 or 24. It was either 13 or 14 people murdered from around the world, and either 23 or 24 people just murdered in the US this year. The reason why this was important for me to do is because, one, I believe that the trans community has been not only marginalized but ignored in our country. I feel that not only has the community been ignored, but the deaths of our community, and not even the deaths, the murders of our community have been ignored. I feel like it's become like a spam article. It's like you see a new one every week, and I believe that not just America, but individually, the LGBT community is becoming desensitized. Yes, we're outraged, but I feel like we're seeing it so much, it's almost like we're expecting this to happen. Do you know what I mean? I also wanted to point out something very important, because it's gonna bring me to the point of why I did this video in the first place. If you were listening to me reading all of these descriptions of all of these trans people murdered in America, with the exception of 2 individuals, excuse me, every single person on that list in America, excuse me, with the exception of 2 people, all were listed as trans women of color. And which leads me to my call to action. Black people, queer lives matter. LGBTQIA lives matter. Trans lives matter. Just like Black lives matter. Okay? I need for the Black community to get out of its own way and protect your brothers and sisters. Because whether you agree with the LGBT community, whether you agree with the lifestyle, whatever it be, what have you, at the end of the day, these are your brothers and sisters being murdered. And I don't feel like we're doing enough about it. I don't feel like we're speaking enough about it. I don't feel like there's been enough action. I don't feel like there has been any type of outrage, for lack of a better word. And I feel that the time for that to change is now. This was just 2019. They have, the website that I was on, it had a list of trans people killed all over the world dating back years. So if I go back and look years back, I'm confident and damn near willing to guarantee that the statistics and the ratio of trans people murdered in America versus around the world would look the same. if not very similar. So I want to encourage the African American community to get off your asses and get out of your own way and step up. That's just it. Because at the end of the day, queer lives matter and we need your support too. We need you to stand up for us just like you stand up for a Trayvon Martin or a Sandra Bland. Stand up for Tracy Steele. Stand up for Breonna Beebe. Stand up for Chanel Lindsay. Like, stand up. Because you letting these things go by without outrage, without outpour, without saying or doing anything is a place of contentment, and it's justifying that it's okay. This is just another example of why the Black and the queer communities need to come together, because the Black community is already so diverse within its own self, but now the specific LGBT people of color are being targeted. Our trans people of color are being targeted. It's not only trans people, as you saw in the article, but in the majority sense, in the macro, trans women of color are being murdered like dogs in the Yulin Festival. Okay? So this is a call to action. I need you guys to read up, do your history, go and find the trans community. I'm sorry, there's people beeping the horn outside. I don't know if you can hear that, but it was distracting. I need you to go out and go into your local LGBT community and find someone to connect to. Find a trans person to connect to, find a queer person to connect to, and lift them up as a person of color. Because at the end of the day, their queerness does not erase their Blackness. It only doubles the chances that they will be targeted in this country. So I need you to understand, Black people already know what it feels like to be targeted in America. Think about what it feels like to add queer and then trans on top of that. It's like stacking yourself with cinder blocks that are pushing you underground. So I hope that this video was not just sad, but it was awakening and inspiring, because I want all of you to realize that trans people don't just look like, the stereotypes you see on TV, obviously clockable, or, whatever the case may be. Not all trans people are out here tricking the people that they're with. If you notice in the article, there was only one case where the police felt like a murder was not directly linked to a transgender hate crime, even though the family and the people who knew the victim felt differently. But you didn't hear about, transgender people tricking straight men for sex. You didn't hear about none of these things. A lot of these trans women were sex workers, okay? And if you're a sex worker, you're not tricking people into sleeping with you. It's a niche, you know what I'm saying? It's a fetish. And I need the Black community to take responsibility that we have let our people of color in the LGBT community down. There's no reason why there should be 24 murdered trans people in America, which is more than the number of trans people murdered around the world. The number of trans people just killed in America in 2019 have been killed around the world. And I want to point out one last point to you before I close. When I looked up this article, I looked up trans people killed in 2019, verbatim. The article I got showed me all the people, and all of those people, with the exception of 2, were trans people of color. I want to just re-drill that into your mind, because I didn't go looking for specifically trans people of color murdered in 2019. I looked up transgender people, and the reality is that the majority of them were people of color. So black people, I need you to stand up for your brothers and sisters. Period. That's all I got, for real. That's really it. That's the point blank gist of it. Stand up for your brothers and sisters and hold them, protect them, keep them safe as if you would any other part of your community. That's it. I'm getting ready to clock out. I'm getting ready to go on break. I may do an essays with essay later today, but I need a cigarette after this video, and I am probably going to cry once I turn this camera off. So thank y'all so much for watching. Once again, if you're new to my channel, please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, do all the things your favorite YouTubers tell you to do in their videos. If you're returning to my channel, hey girl, welcome back. Thank you for coming back and giving me a little bit more of your time and doing this shift with me. Please comment, hit my inbox, tell me about if you're a trans person in America, if you're a trans person of color in America. Hit me up, tell me your experiences, tell me what the ratio of safety feels like in America right now. Tell me how safe do you feel in your community right now, and what the people of color or just the people in your community can do to help you feel safe. Because I want to share those stories, and I want to, you know, not just talk about the bad things that are happening in this country. I want to also offer some olive branch and some extension of hope to how we can not only acknowledge that these things are happening, but somehow put forth some effort to change them. So tune into a POC POV on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tune into In My Queer View on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Tune into Essays with Essay whenever I have something on my heart or in my head. And thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Go call a queer person in your life right now and tell them you love them, okay? That's just it. I'll holla at y'all. Peace.